Track with a note pinned to his wheelchair and left with a bag of diapers on his lap. The disease has also taken its toll on some of Hollywood's most fascinating women. We all remember Shelley Fabares from her days on The Donna Reed Show and more recently as the talented Christine Armstrong on the hit TV show Coeur. But there's no acting involved in Shelley's deep concern for her ailing mom. And we'll talk to superstar Angie Dickinson, who hasn't let her recent TV movie keep her too far from her sister who suffers from the same Alzheimer's disease. It's an hour-long celebrity fight to take hold of a disturbing disease, and it's all next on the Maury Povich Show. When this face appeared on the nightly news last month, it shocked us all. An 82-year-old man abandoned at an Idaho racetrack with a note and a bag of diapers. Alzheimer's victim John Kingery may have been left at the track by a family member who could no longer cope with his illness. The case is still a mystery, as is the cause of this brain killer. But one thing is for sure. For the families of the estimated 4 million Americans who suffer from Alzheimer's, the emotional and financial toll can be devastating. Hollywood star Angie Dickinson knows all too well about the tragedy of Alzheimer's. Her sister Mary Lou suffers from the disease. Shelley Fabares also knows the pain Alzheimer's can bring to a family. The actress who got her start on the Donna Reed Show has watched helplessly as her own mother slowly deteriorated to the point where she no longer recognizes her own daughter. Now at the peak of her career as the beautiful Christine Armstrong on ABC's Coeur, Shelley Fabares is trying to cope with being a mother to her own mother, a role she never thought she'd have to play. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Shelley Fabares. Here's your mom.
Yes.
What is she like today?
Today, my mother, Elsa Rose Fabares, does not speak at all. She has no verbal language skills available to her at all. She appears to recognize nothing, no one. At times, I will even make a sound by her ear just to see if she'll turn around, if she even hears that. She doesn't even appear most of the time to hear that. Every so often, she'll kind of turn her head. But in order to get any kind of attention from her now, I have to get really right down in her face and sort of pull her face over to me. And then she'll maybe look at me for a moment, but it's very unfocused. And she spends all of her time either in her wheelchair or curled up in bed.
That's not how you remember her.
Oh, no. No, my mother has always been an extraordinary woman. She is today 80 years of age. When I say that, as I get closer to 80 myself, it doesn't sound so old anymore.
Well, I think you have a way to go, Shelley.
But when I do say 80, it's impossible, in truth, for me to think of my mother as being 80 years of age. And in fact, when she was 70, she was the assistant manager of a loans department of a huge mortgaging firm in Los Angeles. Well, she was absolutely remarkable. In fact, the manager decided to relocate of this huge department, and when he did, they asked my mother, now remember she was 70, they asked my mother to take over the managerial position, and when she declined, they gave the job to their second choice, who was a 33-year-old man. Now, in today's world, that still is just not something that usually happens.
So at 70, she's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And at what age do you begin to see some changes?
When she was about 73, in 1984. Actually, the truth is, I think if we could ever specifically know, I think my mother was getting ill years before that, but we weren't able to discern any illness at that time. But in 1984, my sister and I began to notice nothing at the time that we thought of as being an illness. She just seemed to be behaving differently than she had before. The reason why we can pinpoint it to 1984 is because I was getting married in December of '84, and my mother told my sister that she refused to get my husband-to-be and me a wedding gift. Now, you would have to know my mother to understand how unusual that was, and she said it was because of something that she felt had happened 25 years previous to this time, which had not happened. Actually, something had happened, but it was not...
Did you say anything to her?
I didn't even know this at that particular time. I just knew that my mother was just acting strangely. By the time I began realizing that something was wrong, not that it was an illness, but that there was something wrong, it seemed it didn't matter. What was more important was to find out what was wrong.
What else was happening? She was found in traffic?
That actually came quite a bit later. That was several years later, when we already had 24-hour care with her. My sister and I began being with her as much as we possibly could. My mother was still working in... It took us 4 years to get a diagnosis for my mother, from 1984 to 1988.
I mean, that just seems to be such frustration, and you have to go through unbelievable... Is it because doctors are reluctant to diagnose that?
No, it's because doctors... as of today, while they feel clinically today in 1992, that they can pretty much 90% make a clinical diagnosis of Alzheimer's, the fact is, as of today, there is still not a definitive diagnosis until the patient has died and they can do a brain autopsy. That could change tomorrow in terms of the research that's being done, but as of today, there is not a definitive diagnosis. So now we're going back to 1984, and it's a very difficult disease to diagnose. It is, as I said at the beginning, I mean, if somebody said, I'm not going to get you a wedding present, you don't immediately go, aha, you have an illness. You know, I mean, that's not what you think of. Also, my mother one day said that my sister and I invited her to go to a movie, and she said very violently that she wouldn't go to that movie because someone who was in that movie was short, and she hated short people. Now, again, you would have to know my mother. My mother was the sweetest and the gentlest and the quietest woman, and this was just aberrant behavior. My sister...
And a behavior that she would not remember? In the beginning?
Those periods of behavior would come, and then they would just simply leave. So she would then be fine the next moment. So a great deal of the time, my sister and I, over the course of the years, began to think, maybe it's us. Maybe we're just being jerks. Maybe Mother is just getting older, and we're asking her to be as sweet and as darling and as wonderful and as kind as she has always been, and maybe she's just having a bad day. But beyond that, we really did feel that there was something wrong. Now, understand, we were going to all sorts of different doctors, and they were not giving us a diagnosis. They were saying, I mean, up until about 2.5, almost 3 years into this illness, nobody who hadn't known my mother from before really could discern that there was something wrong. My sister and I could. Finally, my mother's language skills began to deteriorate so much that even if you hadn't have known her from before, a doctor could sense that there was something.
Is the first thing they think about is, hey, maybe this is a slight stroke? Who knows? Slurry speech,
yes.
Forgetfulness?
Yes. Well, there are many different things that people think of that they have to rule out. In terms of many things that look the same as Alzheimer's. There can be, when I say just depression, I don't mean that that's just an okay thing to have, but I mean there can be somebody who is suffering from depression, and they'll have a lot of the same earmarks as Alzheimer's dementia.
I have seen people who know, without Alzheimer's, who know that they are forgetting.
Oh, yes.
And it sends them into a depression.
Oh,
and
yes.
they start crying.
Oh, yes.
I've seen pictures of that.
Well, it is... Yes, my mother, I mean, I can give you a prime example of my mother. During the 4 years, before we actually finally got a diagnosis of multi-infarct dementia and probable Alzheimer's, my mother would come to my sister and to me, and she would stand literally this close to our face, and our faces, and she would scream at the top of her lungs, and I mean a blood-curdling scream, and then she would hit the sides of her cheeks very rapidly, and then she would open her mouth and point inside at her tongue, and her eyes would just be filled with fear, and then she would just start to sob. Now, this vision of my mother will stay with me for the rest of my days. You can't get a more, it always makes me sort of lightheaded when I even talk about it, but you can't get a more clear communication without somebody being able to speak to you of the terror, the fright, the horror of what's going on. Now, as I understand it, and nobody can tell you this definitely, but my understanding is that my mother cognitively did not understand it on the same level that I did, but she still understood it enough. She used to say to me, I feel as though I'm losing my mind. Well, in fact, she was. Not in the way that she thought she was. I mean, she thought she was going crazy, but...
There's so much about this, and this is why we're here today, and this is why we're trying to help, because so many millions of us...
Yes.
But we're not just talking about the people who unfortunately come down with this disease, but it's you and your sister and Angie and
yes.
the families of 4 million people
exactly.
who have to deal with this. So when you multiply it, you're talking about 20, 30 million people who have to deal with Alzheimer's in this country.
Absolutely. And the figures are such that unless we find the answers to this disease, that by the year 2010, I think it is, there will be at least 20 million people with Alzheimer's, and then you can just multiply the numbers of the caregivers and the family members.
When we come back, another Hollywood star who knows what it's like to love someone with Alzheimer's. She's Angie Dickinson, and Angie will be here in a moment after this. Still to come, we'll meet a woman who was separated from her father and reunited 28 years later because nobody wanted him. Very important. We're dealing a lot with awareness here of Alzheimer's. Shelley Fabares is here, one of the stars of the hit TV series Coach, and Shelley's mother has Alzheimer's. Joining us now, the one and only, the beautiful, the glamorous Angie Dickinson.
Thank you.
Angie can relate to Shelley's story because your sister, Mary Lou, has Alzheimer's.
Yes, she's had it at the very same year that Shelley was saying that they recognized it in her mother. I started seeing it in '84 with my sister. She was only 55 when it struck her. That's another tragedy to be at that age.
And in the beginning, what did you think? I mean, obviously you had been close.
Oh, heavens, yes. Well, I thought it was Alzheimer's in the beginning. I hoped it wasn't. I kept hoping it was a tumor or a stroke or something. But I'm a news junkie and a medical news junkie. I think it's fascinating what we're learning, the medical strides and the space. I mean, I just love it all. And I had read up about Alzheimer's, and I was afraid she was showing the signs, and it was.
What was it?
Her signs were not being able to cope at work. She says, I just can't get all the work done. They're giving me too much. So we investigated to see if they had overloaded her. She was in clerical for the city of Burbank. And I observed her walking back to work one day. I happened to be driving by, and she was walking and a bit spacey as she was walking, and like not being quite sure-footed. Little things like that. Losing her way, coming to my girlfriend's house. We were all going to a movie, and I said, "How ridiculous! I gave you the directions. How could you not find it? And turn right, turn left, stop." She couldn't do that. I mean, it took her an hour to find a place 20 minutes away. That was the very beginning.
Could you get a diagnosis more quickly than Shelley could with her mother?
I don't remember the exact years. It was sooner. I think Mary Lou's regression went quickly, but it took a while. It took a few years.
And today, this is it's so sad because she not only suffers from all of the symptoms that we think of, she can't see.
She can't see. She is totally bedridden. She can't eat. She can do nothing. So, all tragic diseases are awful, but at least some can watch television, some can read and what have you, but, and then also the awareness that you've got it, which is what Shelley was saying, the sobbing and now it's resorted to just quiet crying. She knows she has lost her mind and lost her brain.
What is it like? I mean, is it painful for you to be around her? For both of you. I mean, is it, I just thank the Lord every day. I have two marvelous parents who are in great health. I mean,
It could strike your brother or your sister early. It isn't just for the
Sure, I mean, my
person.
brother's in his 50s. My sister's almost in her 50s.
There's some who actually have been stricken in their 40s.
Yes.
Is that not correct?
Oh, absolutely. As I've traveled around
But
the
is it so too painful? Do you say, my gosh, I don't want to go see my mother today, even though
yes.
she's in a home?
Oh,
or you don't want to go to Mary Lou's house. Mary Lou is living in her own house.
That's right. The pain, the greatest part of the pain for us is over, because now she's controllable. She cannot wander away and get into her car and drive to wherever. So we have reached the part where it's predictable. We know she's in pain and she's crying and all that, and all we can just do is say, I know, Mary Lou, I know, and we just keep. But before that,
yeah, I can imagine. Would you say to yourself, I don't want to go today?
Sure you do.
I think that's really important for people to know and to hear, particularly watching a show like that. I mean, Angie just said it, but I'll say it for myself. Absolutely, there are days when I would do anything. As much as I love my mother, I think I cannot go and sit, because your heart simply breaks. And some days I don't go. And other days when I think I can't go, I do go. But it is, I mean, it's one of the horrors of Alzheimer's that you can do what Angie just said. I take my mother's hand and I hold her and I hug her and I say, I know, Mommy, I know. And she does that with Mary Lou. Beyond that, we can't give them any medicine. We can't tell them that they're going to get better. We can't, in essence, give them any hope. What you can do is to be there and to love them. And it is extraordinarily painful. It is.
Do you talk to your sister when you go to see her?
oh yes, I remind her.
You don't think
She doesn't. She recognizes. She has flickers of, because occasionally I might be talking to the nurses we have round the clock help, and I might be saying, "Oh, you should have seen Mary Lou in 1947, whatever," and I will tell a story, and Mary Lou will laugh. So she can hear, and some things she remembers, or maybe they sound funny because, I'm an actress anyway, and I'm a bit of a buffoon with her to try to cheer her up a little bit. So she has moments of recall, and I'll say, boy, that Mario, that was a hunk. You sure like, and she would say, ooh, so she has moments. And then that makes her cry all the more?
Yes, it does.
Yes, yes.
Do you at times wish that it would be over?
All the time. You always wish they could go to a better place, because this is hell.
Yes. This is a monstrous, monstrous disease. And there is a part of you, I think, that I agree with Angie that, yes, you do wish that this could be over for this person you love so much. And the other part, I mean, she's still my mom, and the selfish part of me always wants my mom here. I mean, I still want my mom back to tell me how to handle all of this. So I still want her here with me, but beyond that, when I can put myself out of the way,
you get the feeling that they want it over too?
Well, my mother told my sister that if she ever found out she had Alzheimer's, she would kill herself. This is before we knew that anything was wrong. And this is one of the things that happens in being a caregiver for Alzheimer's. I think you're put into the position of making what I call God decisions. My mother stopped eating a few months ago and just simply stopped and dropped a tremendous amount of weight.
She was telling you something?
Well,
or do you think that that's just another symptom of a progressive disease?
We have spent since 1984 asking ourselves these questions. Is Mother telling us something? Is Mother trying to say yes to us when she can't say yes? Is Mother smiling when my mother hasn't shown any smiles or any laughter or any recognition of anything like that for probably 5.5 years now? She, not one smile, not one anything. The only thing she has done, the only emotion that we have seen is tremendous frustration. And she spent one period of 4 months where she sobbed morning, noon, and night. I don't mean quiet crying. I mean sobbed. You can't imagine what this does to you. I have 17 thoughts going on in my head at the same time.
But Angie and Mary Lou, she said to you at one time, that she never wanted to be in a nursing home? Is that why she's in her own home?
Yeah, we thought it was time because it was very hard on her family. She has 3 children. And she said, I want to be home. I want to be home. And I said, we'll keep you home. So.
I know it's very painful for some people. It's painful for our guests, but this is very important. We'll be right back after this. Angie Dickinson and Shelley Fabares are special guests. They know firsthand the devastating effects of Alzheimer's disease. Both have loved ones suffering from Alzheimer's. What is it like, Shelley? I mean, is your mother, is makeup put on her every day? Is her hair combed?
Yes, her hair is combed every day. I still have a wonderful woman who goes, my mother is in a nursing facility, but I still have a private person who goes and stays with her each day, as well as my sister and I being there. You know, you asked me something a while ago about if my mother got out into traffic. We had 24-hour care with our mother at home. Like Mary Lou, my mother was still in her own home. But even with that, at first, as I said, my sister and I were there with her, and then we had someone come in for 8 hours, and then 16 hours, and ultimately 24 hours. And even with that, my mother got out of her apartment, and we found her in the middle of one of the busiest streets in Los Angeles with cars careening in every direction. She actually moved furniture to get to the front door and to get out. Now, it turns out that she was, we think, looking for Smokey, my sister Smokey, and for me, because she was expecting us to come and be there. And she was out in the middle of this street, and nobody could get close to her because she was so frightened, you can imagine, with the sound and everything going on. And finally, a motorist stopped a gentleman who was very big and very strong, and he was able to get up to her and kind of put his arms around her very sweetly but very strongly and guide her back across the street. And it was at that point that my sister and I, through a bunch of other decisions, but that was kind of the final time to decide that for her best care, and it was the hardest decision that I've ever had to make, to place her in a nursing facility. But that is where she is
Because
today.
all of our parents say, I'd never want to go to a nursing home.
Who wants to be in a nursing facility? Who? Does anybody here? Of course not.
My husband has Alzheimer's. In 1978, my mother-in-law, we knew, had Alzheimer's, and we took care of her until 1982. And at that time, when she died, I knew, as Angie said, she knew that her sister had Alzheimer's. I knew. I did not have a diagnosis until much later, but I knew that we were walking down the same path with my husband. And so much of what they both said I related to, particularly the early stages are so vague. I took it as rejection of me from my husband. We had only been married in 76. And then going through this with his mother, and then the early onset with him, you know, I thought it was our relationship. That's what I was looking into.
You thought that because of what happened to his mother, that was tearing you, moving you apart from your husband?
Well, he was distancing himself from me. There was a period where he became more antisocial. Then he became more social as he became less functional, actually. It was that period where he was realizing that he was dysfunctional, and he was distancing himself, you know, and that I was taking as rejection of me. And now, well, it's been a long road, and he was home with me until last year.
And he's had to go into a home now?
Last year I had a serious injury. I fell and seriously injured my arm. And while I was in the hospital, I did have to resort to respite care. I also had him in a daycare program, and daycare and respite have really saved our lives, honestly. They've been more important than anything I could imagine. And I fell, and then while I was recuperating, Howard fell, and then he was taken to the hospital, and he's now in the VA hospital in Northport, where we live. And much like both of them, it's the same thing when I go to visit him. He does not know me. He was head of publications for Fairchild Republic, and his words are just jumbled gibberish, nothing, you know. There's an occasional smile. I treasure those moments, you know. It's so difficult to visit. I testified in Washington a month ago. Shelley testified there at a Senate and Representative hearing on aging. And it's just so important to me to get the message across that the caregivers need support to continue to keep their loved ones at home as long as possible. Because once he was institutionalized, and they're doing the best they can,
right.
but it's a different environment. Love is the only thing you can give them.
That's right.
Very
That's right.
good.
Yeah.
Very good.
It's so important to visit when they get to a hospital or when they're at home, for the friends and the relatives that they do have to keep going and bear the pain of their pain, because they need it more than you need to be relieved.
Right.
I don't know exactly what the connection is in terms of genetics, but do you feel, the two of you, that you could get it? Do you think about it?
Oh, sure.
Oh, get what?
Yes.
Of course you do.
Of course.
And you all joke about it. You know, I used to say to Mary Lou, listen, we'll get a room for two. Right. And she would laugh. And yes, you do. Dr. Butler will probably give us the statistics.
Right.
But it's there.
There is the connection.
Of course there is. They don't have the definite answer yet, but of course it's scary.
When we come back, the story, maybe, that has focused us more on Alzheimer's than ever before. It's national headlines, the long-lost daughter, we have her, of the Alzheimer's patient who was abandoned at that racetrack. After this. That was the 82-year-old Alzheimer's patient who was dumped at a racetrack in Idaho. There was a note pinned to his wheelchair and a bag of diapers on his lap. No one knew who he was or who left it there. It was this woman, Nancy Myatt, who recognized him from the news. He was the father she had not seen since 1964. She thought he was dead. More than 30 years, actually, had passed, Nancy. And was there any question that that man was your father?
There was no question that he wasn't. He was my dad. That was, I mean...
How were you alerted?
Well, a niece in Michigan called her parents, and they called me, and it was my brother, and then I seen it on TV, and I had no doubt. When I seen him on TV, I had no doubt.
And so what did you do?
Well, I made arrangements to fly to Oregon. I had to see him, you know. So that's, there was just nothing in my mind, but I've got to go, and I've got to see him. And when I seen him, it was all, of course, you know your dad, and I know that he has Alzheimer's, but he talked, and he knew.
He knew who you were?
Yes, I believe he knew. He did know who I was. Because just before I left, tears was in his eyes, and because I had talked to him before I left.
Did you get any indication as to how long he had been suffering?
No, well, no, not really. Not really.
And how did he get there? Do you know?
Well, only what I've read, you know, that he was left at the racetrack, and I don't know.
How come you hadn't seen him in 30 years?
Well, we just lost contact after I moved to Tennessee. I married and moved to Tennessee, and my brother kept contact with him, but when Mom died, we tried to look him up. We had heard that he was in California, but we couldn't. There was no, no one knew anything, so then we just figured that he had passed away.
You thought he was dead?
Yes, I thought he was dead. So it was really a shock when it come on the... I thought, well, that's Dad. It can't be Dad, you know. But then when I seen him, well, it is Dad, you know.
Amazing.
I mean, it was just something that I had so many mixed emotions about it.
He had gone on, apparently, and married and had another family. Is that right?
Yes, he had 4 other children, you know, by a previous marriage, and
there are reports that one of his other children is being
Yes.
investigated.
My half-sister.
Your half-sister. Who you didn't know?
No, I hadn't seen her since then. She was just a young person.
Also joining us is Dr. Robert Butler, professor of geriatrics at Mount Sinai School of Medicine here in New York, and can answer a lot of questions for us. How unbearable can it get? I mean, we've heard Shelley's story and Angie's story and now Nancy's story and the stories here from our audience members for the caregivers, Doctor.
Well, they've been fantastically eloquent in describing how awful it can be, but with all due respect, Shelley and Angie and I, too, are among the more fortunate. So when you think of so many American families that do not have resources at all, and we don't have in this country a decent long-term care policy, we don't have the type of home care availability that we need, we don't have the resources available for people, the burden is awesome, especially on women.
Well, then put it up there. I mean, what is it? I mean, where does it fit in terms of needs? You can't go to a disease, to a suffering area in this country and say, no one is doing anything for us. So where does it sit in terms of priorities in this country?
Well, I agree that all diseases certainly win our attention and must. And the truth is we really spend relatively little on medical research in the United States. But here's a disease where there's enormous progress underway. We're beginning to see new opportunities.
Such as? Give me the progress, because I've been reading about it. You've been able to isolate some things you haven't been able to do before.
We've been able to identify genetic aspects to it, perhaps 20%, some estimate higher. We've been able to identify a variety of neurotransmitters, which are chemicals that send messages in the brain that decline in the disease. We're learning about specific proteins and other chemicals. In short,
but what does this do? I mean, so you identify them. What does that mean?
It helps us get to the point where we will understand the cause, and then the next step, of course, is treatment itself.
So you think there's going to come a time where it can be treated?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Eileen Ben Cosme, and I'm in the sandwich generation. Just like you all, I suffer the pain of raising my children and taking care of my mother. Right now, I do not have any help at home. I do it alone.
You do it alone?
Yes, I do, and I have the help of the Alzheimer's Association and the daycare that are really my right hand. And
do you wonder how long it's going to be before I can't do this myself?
Well, I've gotten sick. I was in the hospital not too long ago, and the doctor told me I'm getting ulcers. So I just wonder how long I can do it.
And this is the kind of home care you're talking about.
Absolutely. And, you know, the burden falls so much on women. The average age of the caregiver is about 58. They already are concerned about their own futures, and yet they have so little respite opportunities, vacation opportunities, freedom from the pressures which they face on a daily basis.
Right. We'll be back in a moment after this. You want to pick up on some of the themes that we were talking about before, yes?
Yes, I'm the director of an adult daycare program for people with Alzheimer's disease at Peninsula Counseling Center. And I really did want to just accentuate one of the points made about the importance of home care and respite care and daycare as far as services for family members who are caregivers.
And the worst part is what? What's happening?
Well, there have been a lot of cutbacks.
Yeah.
Right. And we have all been affected by these cutbacks, whether we've had to close the programs a certain percentage of times or cut back on staffing or some types of programming supplies. The effects are really monumental, not only on the person with the disease, but on the caregivers. As Eileen had said earlier, a lot of the caregivers are adult children who are employed in the workforce.
You know,
Yes, go ahead, Shelley.
I was just going to say that's one of the things that I think is really tremendously important for people to understand. In the Alzheimer's world that I know a lot of us move in, we always talk about the secondary victim of Alzheimer's disease. There is the primary patient, victim of Alzheimer's, but then the primary caregiver is absolutely the second victim. And until I see so many people nodding their heads, until you go through this, until you are a caregiver and understand what the physical, emotional, psychological, and financial strain and drain is, you simply cannot comprehend this. And we lose caregivers. They of course move out of the work world because you have to be with an Alzheimer's patient 24 hours a day.
I want to find out from Dr. Butler, what really is happening up there in the head? What is it about the brain that is not functioning?
Nerve cells are being slowly destroyed. It may take...
For no reason. We don't know.
We don't understand the reasons. But we do know, more than we used to know, that there's certain proteins that are affected, certain chemicals...
So they're being
need.
destroyed.
Yes.
Is that all that's happening? Is that why it becomes progressive? Just more and more nerve cells are being destroyed?
Correct. And out of this, of course, comes first the problems of memory, then time. We don't know where we are in terms of place. And ultimately, and horribly, as you've heard, just the ability to recognize one's loved ones becomes impaired.
What is the difference, and I'm sure there is, what's the difference between senility and Alzheimer's?
40 years ago, when I first got into this, we said they were senile patients, and we put them in the back wards of state hospitals. And we used to say that Alzheimer's disease was a rare neurological disease. Thank goodness we've made some progress since then. We now know at least that it's a disease along with some other ones. And by the way, it's important to make sure we don't miss treatable conditions. For example, there may be a problem with the thyroid gland. There may be problems that come about as a result of being on chronic medications that may lend themselves to building confusion. So we must rule out those other possibilities.
Well, let's get down to the point where we talked to Shelley and Angie before. Their loved ones don't want to be here. They want to be to, as Angie said, a better world. Could you say, why not? Can you pull the plug?
I say that each of us, recognizing what the possibilities are in the future, not only with Alzheimer's disease, but a variety of other conditions, should sit down, write a letter of instruction called Advance Directives, pick a health proxy, someone that we know knows how we would feel under those circumstances, so that there's the possibility within the law for each of us to have some control over our own destiny, our own death and dying. That's essential.
If somebody said, wrote down, if I am diagnosed with Alzheimer's, please, I want my life terminated, would that hold up?
It would not hold up. What would hold up would be if it was indicated that if confronted with the possibility of resuscitation from heart attack, if there was a infection with pneumonia and a rising fever, do not treat me. You can indicate you do not want to be treated, that you do not want to be resuscitated, but you cannot call for an active ending of your life by a physician.
We'll be back in a moment. Angie Dickinson, Shelley Fabares, Nancy Myatt, Dr. Butler. Yes.
My name is Larry Ans. I'd like to ask the doctor, why does it take so long for the disease to be diagnosed?
Well, for one thing, we know so little about the comparison of it with other conditions, tumors, with the vascular form, which may be circulatory, with the possibility of thyroid disease. There's just so many different possible conditions which have to be ruled out. Next is there's no direct physical indication. It's all mental until death, as was pointed out earlier. So you have to wait, unfortunately, till death to be absolutely sure of the diagnosis. Okay.
I have a question for Shelley first. When your mother, you said, was sobbing, did she have any medication to relieve the anxiety? They have.
She periodically has been on some medications, but at that particular time, she was not on a medication. Yes.
Yes. Stand right. Go ahead.
My wife has Alzheimer's. She's had it for about 10 years. She has deteriorated to a point where she cannot be understood, and that is very frustrating to all of us.
Is she at home or is she in the facility?
She's at home. We try to take care of her as best as we
She's going
can.
to come out of it at any moment? Is that? Do you go home every day? Do you walk in every day and think maybe today something bright will happen?
No, there's no such thing as coming out of it, because it's a slow progression, and each caregiver is really a hero, to speak.
You know, Maury, may I say, the gentleman is so right. The frustration in trying to understand what they are trying to convey to you. Do they have a pain? Do they have a headache? Do they want to speak? It's just so frustrating, and you can't interpret what they're trying to say.
I wonder what it means to be the richest country in the world and to be the only industrialized nation other than South Africa that doesn't have a national health program, including long-term care and the provision of home care. for all of us, because the prices are too great for almost any possible American family.
There is no question. I feel, the doctor and I were talking about it with Angie, that we, at this present time, are privileged because we are able to give the care to our loved ones. But there's so many people that can't.
What about those people on public assistance?
Well, absolutely.
What about those people who just can't afford it?
Exactly. I mean, as the doctor said, I mean, there is something that I say to everybody to encourage your representatives to sign on to the Family Caregiver Support Act, which will enable us to release some funds for respite care and to help the families, and also to be associated with the Alzheimer's Association where there is available help. I just also would like to say that I've taken a different tactic. I still think that my mother, I understand.
You think every day something good will happen?
Intellectually, I have, I think, almost finally accepted that she won't. But I tell you, on a daily emotional basis, I still feel if I say the right thing, if I can just figure out, I mean, on one level, this is just so arrogant, isn't it? But if I just say the right thing, my mother will go, Shelley, oh, honey, I've been trying to, that's my total emotional thing. I still have complete conversations with my mother. I mean, it's a monologue, but I consider them conversations. And I'm just, emotionally, I just keep thinking, if I do this right, I'll release her and she'll be able to go, oh, thanks, here I am, you know.
I don't think anyone faults her for it. We'll be back after this.
If you'd like a printed transcript of this program, send $5 to the Maury Povich Show, Journal Graphics, 1535 Grant Street, Denver, Colorado, 80203. To order by credit card, call 303-831-9000. Russian fax services are available.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report from News 4, New York.
Hi, I'm Al Roker, the News 4 Weather Center, and we now have a severe thunderstorm warning in effect for Middlesex County with a very dangerous thunderstorm now starting to work its way through. Take a look, and you will see in that thunderstorm in Middlesex the Doppler effect, some of those purple dots. That shows where there are this turbulence within the thunderstorm. That means that there's strong winds in there, and we can try to monitor this to see if we're going to get any tornadic activity. We do not see any at this point, but we have to keep an eye on this, because right now we are under a severe thunderstorm watch until 9 o'clock for the entire region, and a tornado watch in effect for Rockland, Westchester, Orange, and Dutchess counties, also Fairfield County as well. As you can see, there is some intensity now, intensifying of that thunderstorm in Middlesex. So until 4:30, there is a severe thunderstorm warning in effect for Middlesex County. The storm is moving to the northeast at about 30 miles per hour. We're going to continue to monitor this for you, and of course have complete details starting on News 4 New York at 5 o'clock. We'll continue to monitor the situation for you. I'm Al Roker, live in the News 4 Weather Center.
This has been a special report from News 4, New York. We now return to our regularly scheduled program.